can't live by bread alone. Yeah, this word got food in it. Stepping on the devil dome, you should see the bruise in it. Backing out the scripts, told a demon to stand down. Go against the Most High, we gon' see how it pan out. The Father gave me hope, fill me with the ghosts. Now they hate it when I glow. Joseph with the coat, looking for their fruit, but they ain't got no cantaloupe. The Messiah or Paleo, you can't be a fan of both. Can't serve two masters. Bread of heaven with the living water, yeah, he's serving up a truth platter. We ain't idolizing no folly, now we setting up a new standard. When Christ touched down, make the whole earth shake like Bruce Banner. Yeah, bringing them troops to ya. End times getting spookier, warfare getting nuclear, mankind getting goofier. They intoxicated with a wine, damn, she done roofied them. I'm checking every word, spirit doctrine like a proofreader. I hate these Nicolatans, hate these great Renatos, man, I hate these flipping pagans. Try to play my father and I hate these imitations. Screaming out Hosanna, we escape that simulation. Better flee to me, vote these or else that lake is where you layin'. Great is he inside of me, casting out this net like I was by the Sea of Galilee. Harvest gon' be plenty, but the laborers are few. Matthew 17 and 20, there ain't nothing we can't do. I can't be no lukewarm, fringes with the blue on. Devil wanna deal, but I told him this ain't Groupon. Praise to the Almighty, you know we gon' sing a new song. Hail the King of King, the ultra low, no Jimmy Neutron. If you keep his laws and his commands, then we can fellowship. I don't get with Pharisees and I don't rock with Hellenists. I ain't praising man, cause only Father get my reverence. I'm swimming in the word, it got me feeling like a yellowfin. Yeah, big stepper, Mr. Demon Chin Checker, tryna hear that well done, cause I feel that displeasure. Father pouring out the wrath, and he got a big measure. If it ain't about the kingdom, then I don't give a six letter. You got faith in the Messiah, you got power. I was clean up in that blood just like a shower. Isaiah 5, you were the vine that came on sour, but now we stand and giving glory in this hour. Yeah, we breaking them curses, fleeing the ways of the serpent. Follow his word and pray for discernment, cause they want us laying in hearses. We gotta rise up, raise and resurface. Choose life and stay in your purpose. The price was paid like a merchant, through Christ who came as a servant. See, the kingdom is really the bag, but yet somehow they chasing a Birkin. After this you ain't getting a chance, while you living you can't but search him. Gotta call on his name like it's urgent, never knowing that day is emerging. So repent at the weight of perversions, judgment coming, that thing is for certain. Let's go.
Shalawam, Shalawam, family. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, all glory, and all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, Yahawashi, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. It's your brother, Shar Ahrayahla. And today we are going to do one of a few Hebrew lessons that I will be doing here on the channel. Right, so if you're new to the channel, make sure you like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Right, make sure you hit the bell icon so that you get notified when I go live and when any videos drop. Okay, but again, I want to give all praise, glory, honor to the Most High God, right, whose name is Yahawaah, right, in the ancient Paleo vocalization. And of course, I do so in the name of his only begotten Son, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, Hamashiach, Yahawashi, right? So let's dive into it. Just actually, before we do that, right? This lesson, right? This is sponsored by the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right? If you have been living under a rock, right? And if you are unaware that there is a Bible out there, right, where when you pick it up and you read it, you literally see the Most High God's name, right? You literally read verbatim off the page, Yahawashi, right? The Hebrew Israelite Bible, right? Available at HIBofficialZion.com, right? HIBofficialZion.com. Link should be in the description of every video, right? Actually, let me go ahead and share real quick. Share screen window. Give me a second. Watch this. All right, make your way over to HIBofficialZion.com. And get you a copy of the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right? Edited by yours truly. Right now, this took years of study and years of hard work, right? It took me about 4 years to complete this this work right here, right? So for anyone who is unaware of what the Hebrew Israelite Bible is, a lot of times brothers and sisters, they'll reach out to me and they'll ask me questions about it. And all of these questions are easily accessible and available. Actually, oh, wrong. There we go. Actually, here we go, right? So, yeah, HIBofficialZion.com, right? Make your way over there, get you a copy of the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right? So people ask me all the time, oh, how much is it? Or they'll ask me, oh, does it include the Apocrypha? All of that information, brothers and sisters, is right here on the website, right? So as you can see here, right, you have the Most High God's name written in the ancient Paleo Hebrew, right? So you see right here, you see the Most High God's name, Yahawah, right? That's what you'll see all throughout the text, wherever the tetragrammaton is, okay? So people ask all the time, does it include the Apocrypha? Yes, it does. It includes all 80 books that are part of the 1611 KJV, all right? So the Hebrew Israelite Bible is a revision of the King James Version. This Bible preserves the name of the Most High God in the Paleo Hebrew script, right? This is what we'll learn about. We'll learn about what a script is today in this lesson, right? So the names of biblical characters, places, and things have been transliterated in what some call the Lashon Kodash as well, right? So, I've received some flack from the baser sorts of individuals, say, oh, you rewrote the Bible and blah, 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 all that's blasphemy, this, that, and the third. I didn't rewrite anything, right? They also don't say that to the translators of the KJV. They don't say that to the translators of the ESV, the NLT, the CSB, all these different English translations. No one ever bats an eye. No one says nothing to these people. But when a brother embarks on an endeavor like this, that's when all the smoke comes, right? So, the names of persons, places, things have been transliterated in what some will call the Lashon Kodash, right? The word Lashon means tongue. The word Kodash means holy, right? It says, for example, instead of Judah, Israel, Jesus, David, and Moses, one would read Yahawashi, Yasharahla, Yahawashi, Dawad, and Masha, right? The HIB includes its hardcover, right? It has the entire 1611 canon, including the Apocrypha, Paleo modern Hebrew chart with transliterations and root meanings, and it has the red letter, all right? So all of this is available at HIBofficialZion.com. If you don't have a copy yet, make sure your way over to HIBofficialZion.com and get you a copy. Now, I'm pretty sure, right? Still got it going on. But if you use the code WW3, right, short for World War III, if you use the code WW3 at checkout, right, you'll receive $25 off your copy, right? Let me just make sure that is still active. Looks like it did expire. Looks like it did expire. Let me see. Inactive. Where are we? Cool. All right, we're gonna extend it. Yeah, it actually ended yesterday, right? But we'll go ahead and extend it, right? I'll extend it to the end of the month, right? So yeah, use code WW3 at checkout for $25 off your Hebrew Israelite Bible. All praise to the Most High, right? Now, right? All praise to the Most High, brother Quadazab, right? So let's dive into it, family, right? So, what is the Lashon Kodash, right? What is the Lashon Kodash versus modern Hebrew, right? So today's agenda, or today's lesson, right? We're going to go over some key terms, right? Go over some key terms to give brothers and sisters a basis for understanding how languages work in general, right? Languages are spoken forms of communication, right? And most languages have a written form, and they have different rules of how you utilize and you express that language in the written form, right? So we'll go over some key terms. Then we'll go over a brief history of different vocalization systems that have occurred over time and that have existed and exist today, right? And then we'll go into some basics of ancient Hebrew, right? What is Hebrew in general, right? So, for instance, the word Paleo literally means ancient, right? Sometimes brothers, they'll say, "Oh, ancient Paleo Hebrew." You're saying you're being redundant, right? The word Paleo means ancient. Okay. So, question for the brothers and sisters watching live, right? And then anyone who is going to watch this on the replays, right? Which one of these artifacts is written in Hebrew, right? So you can say 1 for the one in the top left, 2 for the one in the top right, or 3 for the one that's at the bottom, right? Let's see what you brothers and sisters say, right? Which one of these artifacts is Hebrew? Is written in Hebrew? All right. Sister Shelly Burke said number 2, top right. That one is, she said that one's Hebrew. Sister Romanica Way said top right. Brother Matawathya said top left. Tawan said top right. Brother Oil Can Sean said 1, 2, and 3. Any other answers? Brother Calvin says top right. Brother Quadazop says all 3. Let's see. The answer is all 3. All 3 of these artifacts, right, are written in Hebrew, right? Again, what we have to understand is that there's a difference between a language, right, and a writing system. They could be interchangeable, right? But a writing system, as we'll see, right, is a method of visually representing verbal communication based on a script, and an orthography or set of rules regulating its use, right? So orthography is the set of rules that regulate the use of a script. Sister Shelly Burke, the water, YAHAWAH, shanyam-ishar for your continuous support, sister. Appreciate you. May the Most High God bless you 1,000-fold. All right. So, Brother Quadazop is correct, right? When we look at the last slide, right? This artifact right here, this is written in Paleo Hebrew. This one to the right is also written in Paleo Hebrew, right? And this is using what's known as the Assyrian box script, right? It's known as the Assyrian box script. This is what modern Hebrew is written in, right? Typically, right? Your Masoretic text, right, which is the basis for your KJV, right? The Masoretic text is written in this script. Now, the difference between the Masoretic text and the text here on the bottom, right, is the Masoretic text has what's known as the Nikud or the Nikudoth, right? And we'll go into that in a bit, right? And we'll explain what that is and what that means, okay? So, again, a writing system is a method of visually representing verbal communication based on a script and an orthography or set of rules that regulates its use. Okay, so what is a script? A script is a collection of letters and other written signs used to represent textual information in one or more writing systems. Okay, some scripts, like Aramean, support only one writing system and language. Other scripts support many different writing systems. For example, the Latin script, right? When you write anything here in America, right, we speak English, right? The writing system that we use here in America and in places like England, places where English is the dominant language, right? We use what's known as the Latin script, right? Even if you live in Mexico or let's say Central America, right? So-called Latin America, you live in Spain, right? France, right? You'll also utilize what's known as the Latin script, right? It's used for English, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Vietnamese, Latin itself, and various other languages, right? So that's a script, right? Writing system, a writing system and a script are essentially the same thing, right? They're pretty much synonymous, but they're slightly different, right? So how do we know the Lashon Kodash is correct? How do we know that when we look at the Hebrew, right, and when we vocalize the way in which we vocalize it, how do we know that that is correct, right? How? Well, we understand, point blank period, that there's people who have gone around the world, right, cosplaying as the descendants of the ancient Israelites, the so-called Ish people, right, the small hats, right, that they are indeed not the children of Israel, right? And they have assumed our identity and they have assumed the lineage, right, of the Israelites. They have also assumed the mantle as being the vanguards of the Hebrew language, being the vanguards of the Torah, being the vanguards of the Tanakh, right? And for the record, for any brother or sister who's new, right, the phrase Tanakh, right, is an acronym, right? The Ta, right, is short for Torah, right? The Na, right, is short for the Nevi'im or the prophets, Nevi'im, right? And then you have the Ketuvim or the Kethabium, which are the writings. So things like Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Job, these are considered the Ketuvim or the writings, right? Put that together, you have Tanakh, or the so-called Old Testament, right? They claim to be the vanguards of the Tanakh, of the Torah, of the Hebrew language. But again, they're just cosplaying, right? So again, how do we know that we are correct and that they are incorrect, right? Because you'll even have Hebrew Israelites say, "Oh, that's nigger Hebrew, Harlem Hebrew." Right? You have a group of brothers who very high-minded, very lofty, right? And they'll scoff at you for saying Shalawam as opposed to saying Shalom, right? When we look at the phrase Shalom versus Shalawam, Shalom is how the word that means peace in Hebrew is vocalized in the modern vocalization, right? And it differs from how we pronounce it as Shalawam, right? So again, how do we know that we are correct, right? That the Lashon Kodash is correct? Well, Joel chapter 2 and verse 32 says, "And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of, right? I have it here in the modern box script, but this is the Most High God's name, right? In the modern box script, that's how it's represented. Okay. For instance, my chain, my pendant here, this is the Most High God's name in Paleo Hebrew, right? You have what some will call the Yod, you have the Hey or the Ha, or you have the Wa, or some, as our small hat friends would say, the Vav. Then we have the Ha character, right? So it says that whosoever shall call upon the name of Yahawah, right? Right. Of course, verbatim it says the Lord in the text, right? But if you had the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right, you'd be able to go to the book of Joel, right? Or the book of YAHAWAH, right? The book of YAHAWAH, right? And you would be able to see this text rendered in the Hebrew, right? So Joel 2, YAHAWAH, or Joel 2 and 32, it says, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call upon the name of Yahawah shall be delivered, for in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as Yahawah hath said, and in the remnant whom Yahawah shall call. Right? It's right there. Right? You see all that red? That's the Most High God's name. Rendered in the ancient Paleo Hebrew script in the Hebrew Israelite Bible. Right? So here we have this individual, DeForest James Smith. Shalom is in scripture. Shalawam is nowhere found. Can you show me shalom in the scripture? Please show me in your scripture that you read. Please show me shalom. Show it to me. Right? Shalawam is nowhere found. Again, here's a simpleton coming into the class, right, to demonstrate how much he doesn't know, right? So again, we're going into how we know that how we're vocalizing the Hebrew is correct versus, let's say, the modern Hebrew or the modern vocalization, where they will vocalize the phrase as, or that word as, shalom, right? So again, Joel 2 and 32 says, and it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call on the name of Yahawah, right? You have to, in order to be delivered, right? It says, they shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as Yahawah have said, and in the remnant whom Yahawah shall call. How would we be able to be delivered? How would the remnant be able to be delivered if they are not calling on the name of the Lord? They would have to be able to call on his name, right? Even though we've been discontinued from our heritage, even though we've been scattered to the four corners of the earth, right? According to biblical prophecy, the children of Israel would remember themselves, right? And they will return into the voice of the Lord their God, and that they would teach them to their children, right? And that's when the Most High God is going to deliver us. It also says here prophetically that the children of Israel, right, the remnant of Zion, of Jerusalem, that will be delivered will have to call on the name of the Lord, right? It says, how do we know the laYAHAWAH, right? Second scripture, right? And we'll go to it in a second. So the brother says Judges 6 and 24. Okay, cool. Right. Let's take a look at that. What this brother does not understand is that he does not understand that we have this thing called vocalization systems, right? There are different vocalization systems. I'm sure he doesn't know about them, right? So let's take a look. Judges 6 and 24. All right. So let me actually let's remove that, right? So you look here, it says, then Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord and called it Jehovah Shalom. Unto this day, it is yet an Ophrah of the Abiezerites, right? So it also says Jehovah. Is God's name Jehovah? DeForest James Smith? That's all we'd love to know. Is God's name Jehovah? Did the Israelites vocalize Jehovah? Yes, it is. You're an idiot, right? So have a nice day. Let's get this guy out of here. Yeah, right. So everything that you see in your Bible, right? Your English Bibles, whether it's the KJV, the NLT, the ESV, the CSB, the YPT, whatever it is, right? They are transliterating. They did transliterations, and those transliterations were based off of the Tiberius vocalization system, right? Which we're going to get into, right? So we'll come back to this, right? Again, you're just demonstrating that you don't understand how vocalization systems work, right? And you don't understand that the people who have been the so-called vanguards of the Hebrew language are imposters, right? So another scripture that we can see here is it says here in Isaiah chapter 19, verse 18, it says, "In that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan and swear to the Lord of hosts, one shall be called the city of destruction," right? So this is the biblical prophecy about the nation of Israel, right? And the prophet Isaiah is likening us, right, the children of Israel, to we're being called Egyptians, and we're also being called Assyrians in Isaiah the 19th chapter. Why? Because during Isaiah's time, you had this northern kingdom. They were primarily aligning themselves with the Assyrians and following the ways of the Assyrians. Hence why the Most High God sent the Assyrians against them to destroy us, right? And then we, also in the southern kingdom, right, we were going to the Egyptians for help, right? And we were going down into Egypt, right? So he's calling us Egyptians, right? For instance, if I'm not mistaken, the last king of Judah, Zedekiah, right? He was placed on the throne after Jeconiah and his sons were taken into captivity, right? Zedekiah was put on the throne by Nebuchadnezzar, right? He was given a new name. I think his birth name was Mathaniah or Mathaniah, if I'm not mistaken. And his name was changed to Zedekiah, right? His name was changed to Zedekiah. And actually, it's just to confirm, let me double check here, right? Yes. So yeah, Zedekiah's name was Mattaniah, right? He was born Mattaniah or Mathaniah, right? And his name was changed to Zedekiah or Tazayazath, right? By Nebuchadnezzar, right? He was put on the throne, and he ruled for roughly 11 years, right? And he had to pay tribute to the Babylonians, and he tried to click up with the Egyptians to try and get away from the Babylonians, but the Most High God ultimately sent the Babylonians and destroyed Jerusalem. Our temple got burnt, right? We got slain, and the rest of us were put into captivity, right? So again, this biblical prophecy, right, in Isaiah 19 is an end time prophecy, right? It says, in that day shall 5 cities in the land of Egypt speak the language of Canaan. Now, in the Bible, the number 10 and the number 7 are typically used as numbers of completion, right? So 5 would denote that not a full amount, but in the land of Egypt, which the Bible lets us know that there's a spiritual place, right? There's a place that's spiritually called Sodom in Egypt, which we identify here as America, Babylon the Great, right? And it says that in these 5 cities, right, it says that they shall speak the language of Canaan, right? The language of Canaan. The Canaanites and the Israelites spoke the same language. We interacted with each other for centuries, right? And again, when we look at ancient Hebrew, right, you have Paleo Hebrew, you have Proto-Sinaitic, right? You have the Paleo Canaanite, right? You have all these different categorizations by linguists, right? And essentially, it's the same language, right? We spoke the same language. So this again proves that we will be speaking in more ancient form of Hebrew, not this modern form of Hebrew, right? It says, and swear to the Lord of hosts, one shall be called the city of destruction, right? So this is how we know prophetically, right, that we would be correct, right? And again, we understand that the people who have been the so-called vanguards of the Hebrew language, right, the people who have been the so-called vanguards of the Tanakh and the Torah, right, they have nothing to do with it. They are the children of Edom, and they are cosplaying as the Israelites. They are the synagogue of Satan, right? So let's continue, right? So modern Hebrew vocalization is based on the vocalization created by the Masoretes in Tiberias, right? Now, where is Tiberias, right? Tiberias is in northern Israel, right? Is in northern Israel. And actually, let me take a look. Tiberias. All right, so I'm doing just a brief little overview on Tiberias, right? So Tiberias is a city in the western shore of the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel, a major Jewish center during late antiquity, right? What would be classified as late? What is late antiquity? Late antiquity refers to a transitional period in European and Mediterranean history, roughly spanning from the 3rd to the 7th or 8th century AD. Now, pay attention, family, right? Pay attention to the timeline, right? The phrase late antiquity refers to, right, a transitional period in Europe and the Mediterranean history, right? Israel, the land of Israel, is in what's known as the Mediterranean area, right? This is roughly spanning from the 3rd to the 7th or 8th centuries AD, right? Now, this is a problem, right? This will be very problematic, right, for anyone who is gung-ho about so-called modern Hebrew, right, and the vocalization of it, right? It says a major Jewish center during late antiquity. It has been considered since the 16th century one of Judaism's four holy cities, right? Since the 16th century. That's the 1500s. It says along with Jerusalem, Hebron, and Safed, right? In 2003, it had a population of 51, a little over 51,000, right? Tiberias was founded around 20 CE by Herod Antipas, right? And was named after Roman Emperor Tiberius, right? So again, this is when the city was founded, right? And it's named after a Roman emperor, Tiberius, okay? So it became a major political and religious hub of the Jews in the land of Israel after the destruction of Jerusalem and the desolation of Judea during the Jewish-Roman wars. From the time of the 2nd through the 10th century CE, Tiberias was the largest Jewish city in Galilee, and much of the Mishnah and the Jerusalem Talmud were compiled there, right? So this is very important to understand, right? The timeline of when many of these vocalization systems, right, start to appear, right? So let's bring back the presentation, okay? So follow along, family. Trek with me, right? So again, the modern Hebrew vocalization is based off of the vocalization created by the Masoretes in Tiberias, Israel, right? Known as the Tiberian vocalization, right? Tiberian vocalization is a system of diacritics, or known as the Nikud or Nikudoth, right? Nikudoth would just be the plural of the word Nikud, right? Again, and the word Nikud is just vocalized in this Tiberian vocalization, right? It's devised by the Masoretes in Tiberias to add to the consonantal text of the Hebrew Bible to produce the Masoretic text. So the Masoretic text, like for instance, let's bring this back up, right? So when we go here to Judges 6 and 24, where this individual, forget his name, right? This is the Masoretic text, right? Now, on Blue Letter Bible, you can either show the cantillation marks, right, or show the vowel points. The vowel points are different from the cantillation marks. The cantillation marks go into like inflection and things of that nature, right? So you can either click to show them or click to remove them, right? I have it defaulted as, listen, get all of these points and dots and dashes away from me because I don't care about none of that, because these so-called vowel points that they're using, again, are created by the Masoretes at Tiberias, right? And we're going to demonstrate who these individuals are, right? And again, these are not the people of God, right? Let's get one more scripture real quick, right? Let's go to Psalms 147, verse 19 through 20. It says, "He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nation. And as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord." Right? So everyone outside of the nation of Israel, right, God has not shown his word unto. So they cannot be the vanguards of it, right? The so-called Jewish man, they are the descendants of Esau. They are not physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They are descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau, right? Again, the Most High only showed his word unto Jacob, not to Esau, not to Ishmael, not to any other nation other than Israel. Point blank, period, right? So let's get back into it, right? So again, it's a system of diacritics known as the Nakud, devised by the Masoretes of Tiberias to add to the consonantal text of the Hebrew Bible to produce the Masoretic text, right? Tiberian vocalization continued, right? It marks vowels and stress, makes fine distinctions of consonantal quality and length, and serves as punctuation, right? So this punctuation now being introduced, right? It says, while the Tiberian system was devised for Tiberian Hebrew, it has become the dominant system for vocalizing all forms of Hebrew and has long since eclipsed the Babylonian and Palestinian vocalization systems. Tiberian Hebrew is the canonical pronunciation of the Tanakh, committed to writing by Masoretic scholars living in the Jewish community of Tiberias, the Jewish community of Tiberias in ancient Galilee, from 750 to 950 CE under the Abbasid Caliphate. So now you have Islam. Islam is an Islamic caliphate, is the ruling power in this day and age. So these Jewish people who are living in Tiberias, right, in northern Israel, in Galilee, between 750 and 950 CE. This is when this vocalization was derived. This is when it was introduced, right? Okay, so here we go. So the brother Antifree says, well-timed stream. I have been studying Hebrew for a minute and came to a lot of revelation/conclusions. One of them that he says is, example, instead of basham, it's just basham for in the name, and he would be correct. I've been waving this flag for years now, telling brothers, stop saying basham. Basham is not proper Hebrew. It's not going along the orthography of the Hebrew language, right? Which is the set of rules, right? When you read the Bible, right? When you look at the Hebrew text, you're not going to ever see ba, ha, shum, right? See, the thing is, we have been raised in Babylon. The vast majority of us, our first language is either English or some of us Spanish, right? Our Northern Kingdom brothers. Byron Bull, this is not the topic, right? We're talking about Hebrew. White people do come from Shem. They're not from Japheth. Japheth are Polynesians, Micronesians, and Melanesian people, right? Let's stay on topic though, right? So, yes, Bahashem is not it's using English syntax or English, the rules of English, and then trying to apply it to Hebrew, right? And a lot of the phrases that brothers and sisters say, right, in the Hebrew Israelite community, it's just not proper Hebrew. Example, call halal Yahawah basham Yahawashi. Brothers are trying to say all praises to Yahweh in the name of Yahawashi, right? Halal does not mean praises. Halal means to praise. It's a verb, right? In the phrase all praises to Yahweh in the name of Yahawashi, all praises to the Most High, right? The word praises is a noun. It's not a verb. So we have to use the noun of the word praise, right? In English, I could either praise, like actively praise someone, or I can give praise, which is again is a noun, right? And the phrase all praises to the Most High, right? The word praises is a noun, and so the noun should be used, not the verb, right? So call halal, call halalyum, right? Brothers just got to stop just adding yum to everything, right? So, and we'll dive into that later, right? But the brother's correct, right? Bahasham is incorrect, right? Hebrew is a very simple language, right? And we be trying to add all these extra words, right? We be trying to just, because in English you need all these words, right? You need all these words to make sense of the language, because English is just a language that's just a hodgepodge from different languages, right? It's based off German, right? Some Latin, Greek, French, like it's English is just a mess, right? So because brothers and sisters have been raised knowing English, and that's being our first language, we oftentimes will apply the rules of English in the way that our minds are geared, right, to English. We try to apply it to Hebrew. Like even looking at how English is written from the left to the right. Hebrew is written from right to left. It's two completely different mindsets, right? So Hebrew is very simple. And again, you don't have to use a lot of words to convey a point. Like for instance, thou shalt not murder. Tha is laYAHAWAH. No, la'a means no. Thawadath means to murder. Tha in front of it means thou, you know murder. That's literally that's what it means. You know murder. Do not murder. Simple. Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not kill. You didn't have to say all that, right? Because again, he was very simple, right? But anyway, let's continue, right? So again, the Tiberian vocalization was created in between 750 and 950 CE. That is the 8th. That's between the 8th and the 10th century CE. Now, why is that a problem? Oh, because the Jews, the Israelites, the actual descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were expelled from the land by and large, not completely, during the first Jewish-Roman wars, right? Between, what's that, 67 and 73 CE. CE stands for Common Era, right? Which would be the equivalent of AD, right? And then you had what's called the Bar Kokhba Revolt. If I'm not mistaken, the Bar Kokhba revolts were around 135 CE, which is the 2nd century CE, right? Okay. So we were gone. And who stepped into the land? Who was sent into the land? Who started taking hold of Judaism, right? And you have the Edomites, right? Shout out to my brother Deacon and Hassad. Deacon did a video of a few years ago. This is like back when we were still in Sakari, right? And he demonstrated how the Colonimus family, right? How they were converts, right? They were converts to to so-called Judaism, right? And they literally, actually, let's see, right? I'm gonna drop a link here in the chat for y'all, right? When you get a chance, take a look at this link, right? It shows you history on the Colonimus family, right? And again, the Colonimus family, they were converts, right? And they are essentially the progenitors of the so-called Ashkenazim, okay? So again, understanding these vocalization systems, they come into play well after the children of Israel, who God only ever showed his word to, the children of Jacob, right? Israel. We're out the picture. We've been cast out of the land, right? According to biblical prophecy. Okay. So now, again, it says that it replaced, right? It eclipsed and then ultimately replaced the Babylonian and the Palestinian vocalization systems. Okay. So the Babylonian vocalization system, right, is a system of diacritics or nakud and vowel symbols assigned above the text and devised by the Masoretes of Babylon. Now it says above. Right, when you look at the Masoretic text, right, which is based off the Tiberian vocalization, right, you have dots and dashes above, in the middle, and below the text, right? It says, and devised by the Masoretes of Babylon to add to the consonantal text of the Hebrew Bible to indicate the proper pronunciation of words, i.e., vowel quality, reflecting the Hebrew of Babylon, right? Now, family, what do you think would influence the way that Jews living in Babylon spoke Hebrew? What do you think would have influenced the way that they spoke and vocalized things? Let's see if anyone's got their thinking caps on. All right, what say you? Anyone? How about the language of the Chaldeans? How about that? And then after the Chaldeans, right, you had the Chaldeans were taken out of power, and then you had the Persians, right? And then you had the Greeks take over, right? So they would have been influenced by the different languages that were being spoken in that land, right? Here you go, brother Antifreeze, right? Being influenced by different languages. It's a great assumption, brother, right? So again, he goes on to say, it says, reflecting the Hebrew of Babylon, the Babylonian notation is no longer in use in any Jewish community, having been supplanted by the sublinear, right? Sub meaning below, sublinear Tiberian vocalization. All right. It says the simple Babylonian vocalization systems was created between the 6th and 7th centuries. The 6th and the 7th centuries. So that's the 700s and the 800s AD. It says, while the complex system developed later, there is evidence that the Babylonian Hebrew had emerged as a distinct dialect by the end of the 9th century. Babylonian Hebrew reached its peak in the 8th to 9th centuries, being used from Persia to Yemen. Under Muslim hegemony in the 10th century, the main academies disappeared and the Babylonian vocalization was replaced by the Tiberian vocalization. Okay, so let's continue. We also mentioned here when we went over the Tiberian vocalization system that it eclipsed both the Babylonian and the Palestinian vocalization system. So let's look at the Palestinian vocalization system, right? It is an extinct system of diacritics known as nakud, devised by the Masoretes of Jerusalem to add to the consonantal text of the Hebrew language to indicate vowel quality, reflecting the Hebrew in Jerusalem. Of course, obviously at that time period, right? And we're going to dive into what that time period was. It says the Palestinian system is no longer in use, having been supplanted by the Tiberian vocalization system, right? The Palestinian vocalization reflects the Hebrew of the Holy Land of of at least the 7th century. 7th century. Right? It says a common view among scholars is that the Palestinian system preceded the Tiberian system, but later came under the latter's influence and became more similar to the Tiberian tradition of the school of Aaron ben Moses ben Asher. Right? That's the so-called famed Tiberian Masoretic. Right? It goes on to say all known examples of the Palestinian vocalization come from the Cairo Geniza discovered at the end of the 19th century, although scholars had already known of the existence of a Palestinian pointing from Vitri Makazor. All right. And then this is an artifact demonstrating this vocalization system. Again, understand this, family, that again, looking at the timelines is super important. This is the 7th century, right? So again, here, let's compare these vocalization systems. You have the Palestinian. This was developed in Jerusalem, right? Dates back to the 7th century AD, right? And then you have the Cairo Geniza and Makzor Vitri as some versions or some examples of this vocalization system, right? You have the Babylonian, which was developed in Babylon, obviously, dates back to the 6th or 7th century AD, right? An example would be the Codex Babylonicus Petropolitanus, all right? Again, this is all this us, this is Latin, right? This is Latin name, right? But again, this is the name of the document, right? Then you have the Tiberian, right? Developed by the Masoretes and Tiberius, dates back to 750 CE, which is again the 8th to the 9th century, right? And an example we have is the Masoretic text. You have the Aleppo and the Leningrad codices. Okay. So this is how we understand that we are correct and that this modern Hebrew is not the way, of course, obviously not how Yahawashi spoke, right? It's not how Moses spoke, right? Again, when it goes back to the 8th century CE, 8th century AD, interchangeable, right? Then we have something called Matrices Lectiones, right? Now, Matrices Lectiones came into play when you start to have the influence of Greek, and then of course afterwards you have Latin, right? The phrase Matrices Lectiones is a Latin phrase, which means mother tongues, right? Mother languages, right? So it says are consonants that are used to indicate a vowel, primarily in the writing system of the writing of Semitic languages such as Arabic, Hebrew, and Syriac. Syriac would just be Aramaic, right? Another way of saying Aramaic, right? The letters that do this in the Hebrew are the Aleph or the Alap, right? The He or the Ha, the Vav or the Wa, and the Yod or the Yod, right? So this started to be a thing when Greek came about, right? Now, Hebrew is an abjad, right? You see right here, Hebrew is an abjad, right? Along with Arabic and whatever, I can't even pronounce that, right? So abjad is a writing system in which only consonants are represented, leaving vowel sounds to be inferred by the reader, okay? And then here we have our Hebrew chart, right? So what I highly suggest brothers and sisters do, like when you're trying to learn Hebrew, right? And when you're like, because why do we try to learn Hebrew, right? Why did I endeavor to learn Hebrew, right? So that I can have a better understanding of the text, right? I'll give you an example, right? Let's go to the book of Songs of Solomon real quick. I want to show you something. Let's go to Songs of Solomon 1, right? In verse 5, it says, I am black, but comely. O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon, right? So let's pull this up in the Hebrew, right? Right? It says, Shakawara, Aniyah, right? Black, I am. It says, Wa Na'awa, right? Wa Na'awa, right? Wa means and, right? The KJV renders it as I am black but comely, as if being black and being beautiful are somehow foreign concepts, right? When black is the standard of beauty, right? It renders it as I am black but comely. That's like saying, oh, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl. But when we look in the Hebrew don't render it as such, right? It just says wah, right? So this should have been translated as I am black and comely. I am black and beautiful, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon, right? So this is why, we want to, brothers and sisters in the community want to learn Hebrew, right? So that we can have a better understanding of the text in which we hold near and dear, right? Great point, brother Antifreeze. He says the prologue of Sirach should be why we learn Hebrew, also because that's our language, right? So again, the prologue of Sirach lets us know that things uttered in Hebrew and translated into another tongue don't have the same force in them, right? We clearly see the force has been taken from this text here, right? In Hebrew, black I am and beautiful, instead of I am black but comely. I'm pretty for a dark-skinned girl. That's what this means, right? That's what this means, right? When you read it in English, right? But again, in Hebrew, understand how the Hebrew language works, right? Understand just even the basics of the Hebrew grammar. You can see that this is really what it means. All right. So great point, brother. Right. So let's get back into it. Right. So we have our chart here, and this chart is available in your Hebrew Israelite Bible. Right. It's like on page 3 of the Hebrew Israelite Bible. Right. So the first page, right, has a dedication to the late Elder Karatas Allah from HOD, right? HODC, House of David. I learned Hebrew from watching this brother's videos. I learned the basics from watching this brother. And as I dove more into the language, right, as I dove more into my studies, again, I would utilize the text, the Hebrew text, and to learn more. Because again, if you just go based off of many of the traditions that have been handed down since One West and whatnot, again, you get things like Yahawashi, Shanyam-ishar, Barakath. It's not Hebrew. It's not proper, right? We're just saying a lot to say something very simple. May Yahawah bless you in the name of Yahawashi. So you would say YAHAWAH, basham Yahawashi, instead of Yahawashi, Barakath. YAHAWAH. I learned that by diving more into the Hebrew, diving more into the syntax of the language, right? So I got a dedication to that late great elder. Shout out to that brother, man. Met the brother a few times. The brother he translated the New Testament into Hebrew, right? I don't have it with me right here in my office, but I have a copy of that, right? And then you have the preface, which explains, the HIB, what it is, right? Some of the ordering of books are different, right? The New Testament primarily is the same, right? I did, however, put Matthew and John first because they were eyewitnesses, and then put Mark and Luke afterwards. So again, some of the ordering of the books are different in the HIB, but then in page 3 you got this chart right here, right? So we have our Paleo characters here on the left, right? We have our modern characters here right next to it. We have the English transliteration, right? We have the root of what these words mean, and then we have the Strong's numbers that are associated to them, right? Now, again, I learned this from the elder, right? Now, I have not necessarily been able to find all of these Strong's entries for every single one, as well as you can find that these names, right, that make up these characters, like this is also attested to elsewhere outside of the brother, right? So again, the first character we have is the alap, right? The word alap means ox, right? If you take a look, right? Take a look at the character, right? It literally, one, it looks like an A turned on its side, right? But it also just looks like an ox's head, right? Then we have the bait, right? Or the bayah, right? Bayah, okay? Which is a house, right? If you turn it on its side, right, it looks like a tent, right? And when you understand our people, right, we were pastoralists, right? We were nomads, right? So when we have tents, we would set up shop, right? We would stay in the area as our herds would graze, and then we would move on, right? We were a nomadic people, right? Then you have the gamal, right? This gives us our G character, right? It literally is, it means camel. Gamal means camel, right? In Hebrew. And it literally looks like the hump of a camel, right? Then we have the Dalath, or as our small hat friends would say, the Dalet, right? The Dalath, or the D character, Da, right? For instance, David's name is Dawad, which means beloved, right? If you look at the Daleth or the Dalath, it literally is the entrance. It means door, right? If you look at the Bayath, right, that you have that same shape there, right? Of course, with a little tail, because that's the tent, right? This is the door to the tent, right? Then we have the Ha character, which means to behold, right? And it's essentially just arms going up, right? Then you have the Wah, right? The Wah, or the Wah, which is a tent peg or a nail, right? So again, just looking at the Israelites, right? Who they were as a people, right? Obviously, we were very close with the Canaanites. We dwelt in their land. Looking at the history of the Bible, you have Abraham coming into the land of Canaan, right? You got Isaac, you got Jacob. We're all living amongst the Canaanites, right? Interacting with these people, right? So again, very similar lifestyles in terms of agriculture, things of that nature, right? Sometimes people are nomadic. Sometimes you have, walled city, things of that nature, right? But again, just going into that history, you can see how this developed over time, right? So they have this tent peg. A tent peg will be essential for what? Setting up your house, right? Your tent, where you're dwelling, right? Obviously, your dwelling has an opening, right? And that opening is the door, right? Hence the word Dalath, right? So all of these characters are associated with just things in life, right? Next, we have the Za character, right? Which is essentially our Z character. And it's the word Zayan, which equates to a weapon, right? Then we had the Ha, right? Or the Chaf, as our Jewish friends would call it. They'll call it Chet, right? It means wall or side, okay? Then we have the Tet, or the Tayat, right? And it means clay, right? It's a T character, right? Then we have the Yad, or the Yod, right? And it's a hand, and also signifies power, right? You put something in your hand, you have something in your hand, you have control over it, right? For instance, Job 9:24, the earth has been given into the hand of the wicked. They cover the faces of the judges thereof. Because they have the control over the world, they have the power to do things. They have the power to go into the records of the Israelites and paint the images to look like them. That's why when you type in Jesus or King David or Moses or any biblical figure in Google, you're going to see some white guys. All right. So you have the Yad, right? And it's a hand, right? Palm of your hand. Okay. Then we have the Ka, right? Also known as the Kop, right? It's the Slaki. That's the palm of your hand. The Yad is just like your arm and hand, right? Think about your arm. Here's your arm and here's your hand. You do that, right? It literally essentially makes that character, right? All right, then we got the Kop, which is the palm of your hand, okay? And what you'll notice, and this is why I encourage brothers and sisters to actually familiarize yourself with the modern characters, because when I pull up the blue letter, right, and again you have the Masoretic text, I have to be able to read this, right? I have to be able to read this. So, right, I have to know that this character right here, this is the shin or the shun, right? I have to know that this right here is a ha character as opposed to a ha character, as opposed to a tha character, right? Here you have a tha, right? Here you have a ha right here, and here you have a ha, right? But because, right, a lot of brothers and sisters don't familiarize themselves with this, this is how we get silly stuff, right? I'll give you an example, right? Our good brother Hassad Karab, right? From Genesis, right? Hassad, when he came into the truth, he was a member of the ISUPK. And them niggas don't know Hebrew at all. Their leader has a Greek name. Johanna is not Hebrew, right? And because these niggas don't know Hebrew, right? Hassad's name means mercy sword. The word for sword, right, is Harab, right? And the word, his name Hassad is supposed to be Hassad, not a huh. But because brothers don't familiarize themselves, they think, oh, this is Yiddish. This is Yiddish. No, this is not Yiddish, right? This is a script. Yiddish is a language, right? This is Hebrew, right? And Hebrew can be written in the Paleo script, and it can also be written in the modern script. But because brothers don't familiarize themselves with this, this is how you can do something like that. Okay? Just giving an example, right? Shout out to the brother Hassad, right? Love that brother. So we have the Ka, right? We did the Ta, right? So we did the Ka last. Now we have the Lamad, right? Or the La, right? Our small hat friends will call it Lamed, right? So the Lamad, I mean, it's a staff, right? We literally look at this character, it's a staff, right? And it also means to learn or to teach. Now, why is that? Typically, who's walking around with a staff? Typically, an elder. And an elder person, right? Someone who's lived more life, their job is to teach you, right? Their job is to teach you. Yes. Right? So this is where this character comes from. Lamad is a staff, right? Again, the OGs, they walk around with canes, right? One of my Chance the Rapper, who he's from Chicago. I've been rocking with Chance the Rappers since like 2000 and like 11, 12, something like that, right? He just came up with a new album, and he got a song on the album called No More Old Men, right? If we ain't got no more old men, right? No more OGs, right? Showing the younger generations how to operate, how to move, how to just live, right? Just giving you game and wisdom, right? This is why these younger generations are going to be cooked, right? Because we have to learn from the elders. We have to learn from OGs. Of course, we're supposed to learn from wise men, right? The Bible tells us to not make yourself an underling to a fool, right? And a lot of people in the Hebrew Israelites community have made themselves underlings to very foolish men, okay? But I digress. Now, so that's where we get the character Lamad, or the La, right? Then we have the Mayam, right? The word Mayam means water, right? And if you look at the character, what does it look like? It looks like waves, right? It looks like waves appear where? In water, right? Bodies of water, right? So we got the Mayam, which means water. Then we have the Nun, right? And it means sprout, right? And if you kind of look at it, right? I did a lesson a few years ago at the Roots picnic. So this was about 2 years ago. 3 years ago now I think about it, right? And I went into the concept of roots, right? So when you plant a seed, right, and it starts to sprout, right, it's called a sproutling, right. What grows first? You have the roots. The roots take root, right? The roots take root, right? And then that seedling sprouts after it gets the roots, right? Because what's the purpose of the roots? The roots are to absorb the what? The water, right? Water is nutrients. Life comes from water, right? So you have this seed that's planted in the ground. It takes root, right? It germinates and the roots go out, right? After the roots go out and it absorbs water, now it starts to grow, right? It sprouts right up, right? It sees light and now it grows into whatever plant it is, right? And if you look at this character, it looks just like a seedling sprouting up, right? So here we have the word, the nun, right? The nun, right? Or as our Jewish friends will call it, nun, right? Then we have the samak, right? Or as our friends would say, semek, right? The samak, it means to support. It also means a standard, right? It's like a banner, right? For instance, Jehovah Nisi in the Bible, right? Yahweh Nasayah, right? The samak is right there in that word. It's a standard, it's my banner, right? So it's essentially a flag, right? Samak, right? Next we have the ayan character, and what is it? It's an I. It literally is an I, right? And it's vocalized as I, right? So all of these is a, ba, ga, da, ha, wa, za, ha, ta, ya, ka, la, ma, na, sa, I, right? Ayan, right? It means I, right? Then we have the word pa, right? Which means mouth, right? If you just look at it, right? It's basically a P, right? It basically is a P, right? That's not fully connected, right? And it looks like someone's mouth, right? Pa, it means mouth. Then you have the tazah, right? Tazad, it means side, right? Then we have the kwa, right? Or the quap, and it means circle or horizon, right? This is our Q character. Now, depending on, sometimes it has a k sound as well, right? So sometimes it can be rather redundant of a sound. Even in the English language, right? The Q character is quite. You can't in English you can't use a Q without a U, right? There's a linguist that I follow in the UK. His name is Rob Words, and he goes into the history of the English language. Like I said, I like to dive into languages and understand languages and whatnot, because words are powerful. Words have meaning, right? Etymology, things of that nature. This is what I dive into and I study, because of trying to understand the Bible more, right? And there's been several attempts to change the script in which English uses, because even the vowels that we have, A, E, I, O, U, are not enough to represent all the sounds in the English language. So what we'll do is we'll couple up vowels to make different sounds, right? Short vowels, long vowels, things of that nature. So, just to make English a little bit more it's easier to understand and read. But when you look at the Q character, the Q, you don't use a Q without a U, right? And again, you can literally you can spell the word queen using Kween, queen. You could do that, right? And just get rid of the Q character, right? So it can be redundant, like when this character is used at the end of a word, right? It just makes a k sound, right? So then we have next we have the ra'ash, or as our Jewish friends would say, the resh, right? And the ra'ash it means head, right? It means head or chief, right? Top, right? So if you look at the resh, right, it's an R, right? It's an R that's been inverted, right? And it doesn't have the little slant, right? Even when you look at, for instance, in Greek, right, the equivalent would be the character rho, right? And rho is an R, it looks like a modern P almost, right? But again, it's the same character, right? And know what it is? It's the side profile of someone's head. If I turn my head like this, and you were just like doing a stick figure of my silhouette, right? You would draw a line up and then a little triangle, because this is representing the profile of someone's head. That's what the word Ra'ash means. It means head, right? Or chief. Then we have the Shah, or the Shan, right? And it means teeth, right? If you look at the Shah, it looks like a W, modern W, looks like the teeth or the fangs of an animal, okay? And then the last character we have is the Tha, right? The Tha, right? Or Tha, right? And it means sign or mark, right? Thawa, right? So here are your characters in the Hebrew language, right? You have your Paleo and you have your modern, right? Now, again, one of the reasons why it also is important to familiarize yourself with the modern, is because you have what's called final characters in the modern, right? You have a final ka, you have a final mem, you have a final nun, you have a final pe, or you have a final tzadi, right? These are final characters. What do I mean, right? When you have the word mayam, which is water, right? Let me show you. So the word water. Right? Water, right? You notice how this character and this character are different. The one to the right, this is the mem, right? Or the mayam, right? And it's used in the beginning of the word. Again, he was from right to left, right? You have your yod or your yad right here, and then you have your final mem, right? Over to the left, right? You have these different characters, right? Now you have a final ka, right? Like for instance, I'll show you the word king. The word king is malak, right? Right? Malak. We have the final ka. All right. Now, this could confuse someone because this also looks like the modern wa character. So, depending on what you're reading, right, in the Masoretic style text, right, you might get confused with a final ka and a wa character. You can easily confuse it, right? Same thing with the dalet and the resh, right? The dalath and the ra'ash, right? The D character and the R character, right? They look very, very similar, right? So this is why it's important to familiarize yourself with both the modern and the Paleo. So when I was learning Hebrew, right, the first thing I did, family, right, after learning some of the basics, I would just to trick my brain into memorizing and understanding how these characters work, I would write them. I would write all of the Paleo characters. I would write them, right? And then I would also write the modern. I would write them down, right? I would write them and I would familiarize myself with them. And what I would do is I would associate, because Paleo is easier, right? Because they're distinct characters, right? See, the brother Quasar said he got tricked to doing the same thing, right? So what I did was I associate these characters with these characters. So I know when I see this Aleph, right, I associate with the Allah, right? When I see this Beit, I associate with this Bayah, right? When I see this this Zayan, then I associate it with this, right? When I see this ha, right, which is different from the tha and the ha, which look very similar, I associate it with the ch, right, with the chaf. So once I tricked my brain to seeing that and to understanding that, this is how I was able to come here into Blue Letter Bible, right? When I'm diving into the Hebrew of a particular verse, right? Let's go back to Songs of Solomon, right? Just to show that again, right? So here, right, again, I can see this Shakawara, Shakawara, Anya, Wa, Awa, right? I know that this is not a cha. I also know that this is not a tha, right? And it says banwath, banwath, right? Which means daughters, right? This is the tha character. I know that this tha is different from this ha and it's different from this cha because I make myself familiar with the Masoretic text, right? Which uses the Assyrian box script, okay? So that's why this is super important, family, okay? Now, I know that the ha is not connected. I know that the cha is connected, and I know that the tha has this little tail on the end, right? Tha, okay? So that's how I'm able to read this, right? So Shakawara Anya, Awa, Banath, Yasharahla, right? Ka, Ahalya, Quadar, right? Very simple, right? Ka, Yarayahwath, Shalawam, right? At this ka means as, right? This ka character in the front means as, right? And we'll dive into that in another lesson, right? So these are the basics of understanding what a writing system is, right? The basics of understanding what a script is, right? How we know that the Masoretic vocalization, right? The Tiberian vocalization, how that's incorrect, right? We looked at biblical prophecy, Joel 2:32 says that they that shall be delivered, right, of Mount Zion shall call upon the name of Yahawah. How will we be able to call upon the name of Yahawah to be redeemed, right? If we have to call upon his name, if we don't know his name or how to pronounce his name, right? The Most High God's name is not Yahuwah, it's not Yahweh, it's not Jehovah, like the simpleton that came into the live earlier, right? It's Yahawah. Yahweh's his name, right? Again, that's the proof of why the Lashon Kodash is correct, right? And then we also looked at Isaiah 19 and verse 18, which states that in the land of Egypt, that there will be out of 5 cities that will speak the language of Canaan, right? Again, Israelites and the Canaanites interacted. They had dealings with each other. They were able to communicate with each other because they spoke the same language, right? And again, that's a lot different than this modern Hebrew, right? Again, modern Hebrew, right, is not Yiddish. It's not. Brothers got to stop saying that. Yiddish is a distinct language that uses the same script as the modern Hebrew, but it's not the same language. Okay. So we learned that, right? We learned about the different vocalization system, the Tiberius, right? We have the Babylonian, we have the Palestinian, all dating far after the Israelites were cast out of the land of Israel with the first Roman Jewish wars between 67 and 73 AD, as well as the last stand of the Bar Kokhba revolts, which happened around 135 CE, which would be 2nd century. We're 4 to 5 plus centuries removed from the land of Israel where these vocalization systems were developed. Okay, so that's an overview on that, right? So now, right, let's dive into some basics of Hebrew. All right, family, give me 1 second, and I'm about to get us set up here. All right. So let's remove this. Let's get this all set up here. All right, let's actually. All right. Okay. All right. So make sure you guys can see this. All right. So we went over our characters, right? Now let's show how you make nouns plural, right? So what is a noun? A noun is a person, a place, or a thing. It's an object, right? A noun is different from a verb. It's different from an adjective, right? It's even different from a pronoun, right? Pronoun is a form of a noun, right? So we have our plurals, how to make nouns plural, right? Now, Hebrew is a male dominant language, right? It's a male dominant language. So we have our masculine, we have our feminine. Okay. Now, how do we make a Hebrew noun? How do we make a Hebrew noun plural? Right? You have two modifiers, right? Again, Hebrew is written from right to left. Okay. So right here, right, on the masculine side, we're going to add yum. Right. On the feminine side, we're going to add waf. Right. Waf. Okay. So let's look at an example, right? We have the word anyone can take a guess of what this word is. Can anyone tell me what this word right here is? It was just on the last slide. Right? Anyone? What we have here is the Hebrew word Allah, right? We have our alap character, right? We have our lamad, and we have our pa, right? Put it together, alap, right? This is how you would transliterate it. Alap. And alap means ox. Okay. Now, how would I say cattle in plural instead of one singular ox? I would say alap yum. Alapium, which means cattle, okay, or oxen, oxen or cattle. Simple, right? Now, let's look at another word, right? We have this word right here. Can anyone tell me what this word is? Anyone? sapar, right? Good job, right? We have the word sapar, right? And what does sapar mean? Sapar means book or scroll, right? So we have the word sapar, right? To make this plural, right? We would put the waf at the end. Sometimes you'll also see just they'll add a th at the end, right? Sometimes, right? You'll see that in the text. You'll just see, like for instance, in Songs of Solomon, 1 and 5, it said that the daughters of Jerusalem, the word there was a banath. It would also be rendered as banwath, right? We would also see it as banath, right? Simple, right? So no, 11 is not halar, right? This is a samak, right? This is a cha, right? And then actually I drew that terribly. Let me erase that. Drew that terribly, right? This samak is not to be confused with this. Not to be confused, okay? And then this character, the pa, not to be confused with lamad, okay? I'm writing on an iPad, family, so this so my handwriting is not the best here, so bear with me, okay? So let's erase that. All right, so we have sapar, right? How will we make this plural, right? And this means book or scroll. We would write sapar wath. Or wath. Now, real quick, right? When you go into this is not modern Masoretic. No, not modern Masoretic, right? Now, when I'll give you another example, right, of a feminine word. A lot of words, right, are going to be primarily masculine, right? But what you got to pay attention to, right, and what you got to confirm with, right? I use Blue Letter as a tool all the time, right? So in Blue Letter, if you click on a word, actually, let me remove this. Let me add. Right. So when we pull up the Blue Letter, right, you're gonna normally see some people's default is the reverse, right? It's going to default to the reverse interlinear. I let mine to be forward, right? I like to have the forward, okay? So it starts with the Hebrew, shakawara, black I am, right? Shakawara, black I am, right? So here, up here with the Masoretic text, right, you can click on a word, right? See how it says we have the Hebrew parsing, right? So in this Hebrew parsing, right, we have right here, we have this adjective, right? This feminine adjective, right, of beautiful, LionOfYahawah, right, or comely, right? We have all this information about it. The part of speech is the adjective, the type, right, the gender, the number, singular, state is absolute, right? And then we have this, we have wa, a conjunction, which means and, right? I am black and beautiful in this verse, right? So you can click on this to see the Hebrew parsing, right? You can also, even if you click on a word, right, shakawara, right? The word shakar, right? It's an adjective, right? Adjectives don't necessarily have, they're not necessarily masculine or feminine, right? They can be used to describe either, right? So, for instance, right, Qadar, right? This is a noun, right? And obviously the proper name, right? So that's not even a necessarily good example. Let me find another one. Boom. This word right here, right? Let's click on it. If you click on the word, right, even if you click on it from here, right? Let's go to the word for curtains, right? Click on the Strong's number, right? YAHAWAH, right? YAHAWAH, right? It's a feminine noun. Feminine noun. It'll tell you the part of speech and it'll let you know what type of noun it is. So that's very important. And it goes back to this verb, which means to displease, grieve, be grievous, evil, harm, sad, right? How that's etymologically corrected, I don't know, right? But here's the word, right? Feminine. It's a feminine noun. So if the noun is feminine, you have to use the feminine modifier, right? Now I'll give you another one, right? Abba. What does Abba mean? Can someone tell me what the word Abba means? Anyone know what Abba means? Father, right? Now this is going to take you on a loop, right? Watch this. How do you think you would say fathers in Hebrew? Fathers. How would you say fathers plural? Fathers is Abba, right? Right? Abba. Which just so happened to be the first two characters, the A and the Ba, right? The Alap and the Bayath. Father, you have an ox head and you have a house. What is a father? He is the head of the house, right? What's a father's job? His job is to lead his family, his house, as he leads what? Cattle, right? And we look at our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were pastoralists, right? Abba, not Ab, right? Abba, right? Abbayim, no. We're not doing Masoretic. We're not doing we're teaching Paleo Hebrew, we're teaching the LaYAHAWAH Kodash, we're not teaching, right, the Masoretic vocalization, right? You would think it would be Abbayim, right? You would think it would be Abbayim, right? So check this out, right? This threw me for a loop, right? And this is why I always check, right, in the Wu letter, right? So fathers, right? To thy father, thou shalt go to thy fathers. Now, so this is God talking to Moses. It says, and thou shalt go to thy fathers in peace, and thou shalt be buried in a good old age. I believe this is, Abraham, right? Abram, right? Before his name is changed to Abraham, right? It says al, which al means two. Fathers, Abathyaka, right? Now the tha, right? Again, it's just a shorten of waf, right? I told you sometimes that instead of seeing the full waf, you'll see just the tha, right? So it says Abathyaka, right? Abathyaka, right? Again, it's still a masculine noun, but it uses this tha, right? Right? Crazy, right? Your fathers. Let's see another place where the word fathers comes up, right? Fathers, our fathers, thy fathers, our fathers, my fathers. But I will lie with my fathers, right? Let's take a look at this. Abathia, right? Abathia. You would just think it's crazy, right? It's using the feminine, which I don't know why. Right. I don't know why. I don't know why that is, right? But it, like I said, it threw me for a loop when I first like dove into this, right? You would just think it would be Abayam, right? Let me see. Your fathers, my fathers, your fathers. Let's see if I can find another. Their fathers, their fathers, my fathers. All right, let's see. Let's do one that says our fathers. All right. Genesis 46 and 34. Our fathers. Yahawah. Yahawah, right? Our fathers. So again, it's using the tha, which is typical for a feminine noun, right? So it again, you have weird things like this, but for the most part, if you want to have a feminine noun, you're going to use. Listen, overkill. This we're not doing. Just again for the record, we're not. This brother has the nerve to tell me avo thenu. We are not diving into Masoretic Tiberian vocalization Hebrew, right? Clearly, you just got here, right? That vocalization system was created by your enemies, by the people who stole your identity, right? That's when it was created, and it was created in between the 8th and the 9th century CE. So no, it's not that. We are not adhering to the Hebrew of the synagogue of Satan. You can go somewhere else with that, right? Not over here, okay? So anyway, right? This is how you would make a noun plural, right? You add either yum or wath to the end of it. Okay. Let's get back. Boom. Okay. Where were we? Right. So now we're going to go over pronouns, right? We're doing nouns today, right? How to make them plural. And then we'll go over pronouns. Actually, let me give you one more example of a right. I'll give you another word, right? For instance, right, we have the Feast of Tabernacles coming up, right? As our Jewish friends, they would call Sukkoth, right? But what's the singular, right? What does the word Sukkoth or Sakawath mean? It means booth, right? So we have the word Sukkah, right? The word Sukkah means booth. Right, we have the Feast of Booths or the Feast of Tabernacles, right? What would this be? Plural, sa, ka, wath, sakawath. That's how you would transliterate it, right? Again, this is sukkah, the singular, right? This would be the plural. Again, our Jewish friends would say Sukkoth, right? Sakawath. Tomato, right? But again, we're not dealing with the white man synagogue of Satan's vocalization of Hebrew. That's the wrong place. All right. All you Yahawah niggas, right? Y'all can have at it. Okay. So now let's go to the pronouns. Right. So we have singular pronouns. Then we have plural pronouns. All right. So I, right, would be Anya, right? Anya, right? Oops. Anya, right? Means I, right? Then we have you. We have the word ata. Like for instance, today, this past weekend, I was back home in New York for my baby shower, right? All praise to the Most High. My wife and I are expecting our first child in, I think we're about to hit 36 weeks on Wednesday, right? In about a month, right? He's due right after Tabernacles. Lord willing, he does not come during Tabernacles or before Tabernacles because we would like to enjoy it, right? So some of the brothers they came up to New York for the shower, right? And we went and we held camp, right? We went and held camp right before the shower, right? So I grew up in Bed-Stuy, right? The baby shower was right around the corner from my mom's house. And we went and held camp up near Eastern Parkway, right, which is in Crown Heights. Now, Crown Heights, right? Amalek is all up in Crown Heights, right? So you got small hats walking around, yarmulkes, curlies, what they call zit, which are not zit, right? No ribbon of blue, right? And every chance I get, right, I see a small hat and I'll yell, Ata lo Yehudi, right? Ata means you, right? Lo, and how they were vocalizing means no, right? La'ah, right? Means no. So I'll say, Ata lo Yehudi, right? You're not a Jew, right? I'll tell them, Ata shatan, Ata mamzir, Ata dumi kaleb, right? Ata mamzir, you're a bastard, right? Ata adumi kaleb, right? Edomite dog. You're an Edomite dog, right? Ata shatan, right? You are Satan, right? You are an adversary, right? So the word ata means you, okay? Ata, okay? And then we have he. He is YAHAWAH. YAHAWAH. Right? YAHAWAH. And then you have she, which is HAYAH. Yeah. She. Now we have we, right? We in Hebrew is anachnawa, right? Anachnawa. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I forgot what tazayazath means. Thinking me, what is I forget what tazayazath means. Tazayazath, what's your name mean? One of the sisters is asking. Right. So we have anachnawa, angry lion. So technically it should be Ahrayah tazayazath, right? Because in Hebrew you put the adjective after. The adjective comes after the noun, right? Kind of like Spanish, right? In Spanish, right? You if I wanted to say blue book, I would say libro azul, right? Libro is the noun, which means book. Azul is the adjective, means blue, right? Libro azul, blue, book blue, right? It's the same in Hebrew, right? In English, we would say blue book. We wouldn't say, oh, pass me the book blue. That don't make sense because again, each language has its own orthography or set of rules, right? If I told someone to pass me the blue book in Spanish and I said azul libro, they was, what? Because again, that's not how it works. In their language, in that language with this orthography or this set of rules, the adjective comes after the noun, right? So again, for the word we have the word anachnawa, right? Anachnawa. Anachnawa. It means we, okay? Then we have you, plural, and this is the masculine, right? If you have a thumb, right? So a thumb. Right? Then you have you, feminine, right? And you won't see too many examples of this like in the text because, again, Hebrew is a male dominant language and typically it's being spoken to everyone. Like, for instance, in Spanish, right? If I walk into a room full of children, right? Let's say I'm a second grade teacher, right? I would say in Spanish, hola chicos, right? Or I say hola niños, right? There are boys and girls there, right? So I would say niños instead of saying niñas because, again, the male is a male dominant language and the male will take the precedent, right? So the feminine version would be a thun. Oops. A thun, right? A thun. And then we have they, masculine. We have they, feminine, right? So they, right, would be hum. And then the feminine would be hun. Right? And those are your pronouns in Hebrew, right? You have I, anya, you, atha, he, hawa'ah, she, haya'ah, we, anachnawa, you, masculine, right? Talking to multiple people, you, a thumb, feminine would be a thun, they, masculine, hum, and then they, feminine, hun, okay? And then we went over how to make a noun plural, right? Again, for a masculine noun, you add yum, right? For a feminine noun, you add wath or just a tha, right? So you have sapar wath. You have booth, which is the word sakah, sakawath, or as our small hat friends would say, sukoth, right? I'll give you another example, right? We have this word, right? Bun, which means sun, right? Bun equals sun. If I was to say sons, I would say bunium. But if I want to say daughters, right, it's ban nath, or it's bun wath, daughters, right? Daughter or daughters. Okay. So with that is the end of today's lesson. All right. We will do another installment of Paleo Hebrew with Shar Ahrayahla. Lord willing, next week, right? Maybe next week Sunday. If not next week Sunday, the following Sunday, right? And what we will go over possessive adjectives, and we will go over prepositions, right? Because I spoke about it earlier, right? For instance, right, we've been taught to say Yahawashi, basham, right? If you notice, above my image here, right? You see called thawadath laYAHAWAH basham Yahawashi basham. You don't have to put the ha, right? So we'll go into these prepositions, right? Ba, which means in or on, is a preposition, right? You don't have to add the ha, which is the definite article, which means the, right? It's a definite, like the bottle, right? Not a bottle, the bottle, right? Ha will be that definite, right? Article, right? Again, you don't have to have that extra article right there, right? But that is it for today's lesson, right? Make sure you make your way over to HIBofficialzion.com, right? Today's class and all of our classes will be sponsored by the Hebrew Israelite Bible, edited by yours truly, right? And for anyone, right, who wants to be simple, right, the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right, what I did was everywhere you see the word Lord in all caps or the word God in all caps in the Hebrew, right, in the English Bible, in the Hebrew, you have the tetragrammaton, right? Here is the Most High God's name in the Paleo Hebrew, right? The tetragrammaton, right? So when you read the scripture, right, you'll see you'll see Yahweh's name in red in the Paleo script throughout the text, right? And then we also transliterate it, all right? Transliterations are different from translations, right? The translation, right, is taking one word from one language and what would be its equivalent in another language. For instance, right, the brother Ruben just said Shalawam, right? The word Shalawam means peace, right? So if I was to translate from Hebrew the word Shalawam into English, I would just say peace. That's a translation, right? Now, what he wrote is a transliteration as well. It's a transliteration of the Hebrew characters Shah, right? The Shen, the Lamad, right? The Wa, and the Mayam character, right? That's the word for peace, as in for greeting, right? I think we'll also go over some commonly misused phrases amongst Hebrew Israelites that are not proper Hebrew, right? We'll probably go over those next time as well. Yahushua Hamashiach of Yahuwah. Now, your name, are you claiming to be the Messiah? Right? Are you claiming to be the Messiah? I don't know, right? So it's not about the small hearts no more. It's on you now. What about the Hebrews that look like us who say they are not ring? Small hats are too obvious, easy work. What about the ones that look like whatever, right? What about them, right? Again, they're vocalizing Hebrew in a way that has been presented to the world by who? By the small hats, sir. It's really that simple. It really is that simple, right? Action tripping. Let me go here, right? It's very simple, right? Brothers don't be paying attention, right? So yeah, make your way over to HIBofficialzion.com. Get you a copy of the Hebrew Israelite Bible, right? You can use code WW3. Use code WW3 at checkout, right? For $25 off, right? Use code WW3, WW3 at checkout for $25 off your HIB, right? Dang, how is YouTube stopping me from making my own comments in my own chat? That's crazy. YouTube rejected your comment. This usually means they think it's spam. Like, what? That's crazy. But yeah, use code WW3 at checkout for $25 off your HIB, family. All right. But with that, I want to give all praises, all glory, all honor to the Most High God, whose name is Yahawah. Of course, I do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahawashi, who the world inwardly calls Jesus Christ. Until next time, Shalawam and Matawathya.